forum, and if there's enough interest and the conversation is still vibrantly going, we can extend this into June. I'm fine with that, if you all are fine with that. Just know next weekend, like I said, I will be gone, so we won't have forum next weekend, but you're still invited to participate in the SOS Faith Formation stuff that's going on. But then we'll pick back up on May 21st. Now, May 21st, there is a reception for high school seniors and graduating seniors following worship. So we'll have a forum in the sanctuary. So come, grab a piece of cake, congratulate the seniors that are graduating, and then head into the sanctuary. There's room. Yep. We'll make room for you, Pete.
You take the guy's bench.
So on Sunday the 21st, come, have cake, congratulate our seniors, and then head into the sanctuary where we'll continue the adult forum. And then also May 28th, we'll have the adult forum. And then, like I said, if the conversation after these two sessions is still vibrant and you're all interested in continuing, we'll continue on with that conversation. We'll have to take Pentecost off because that's confirmation, and I have to rush to Coralville for a concert, but then we can pick it up Sunday, June 11th, which is the day after my birthday, so bring me presents.
Okay.
So we're planning
By
on,
being here and present.
My presence is a present.
so we're planning on doing this discussion on several different Sundays.
Yes, yeah. Because there's a lot, as
Yeah.
you read through this book, I'm sure, like
Of
me,
course.
you have a long list of questions and thoughts. There's a lot to digest in this book. Even as I was rereading chapter 6 to prepare for our first discussion, I was like, ooh, should I talk about that? And, ooh, should I talk about that? And, ooh, should we touch on this? And it's just almost every other sentence, there's like something that you could touch on in this book. So,
Does somebody need to borrow a copy of the book?
I'll borrow it for now. I left mine sitting on the dining room
Our-
table. Thank
Our
you.
daughter had one in her car, so she gave us hers.
okay. So, I just have a couple questions I want to throw out there as conversation starters to kind of get the conversation going, and then we'll dive more deeply into the book. Now, most of our discussion is going to focus on chapter 6 and onward. I will ask you a question about some of the beginning introductory chapters that cover more of the story of how Mac got to his encounter with God, but we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because that's really just the narrative. It's like the introduction of Job. It's just there to set up the rest of the story. So my first question to get the discussion going is, did you enjoy the book?
Yes.
Yes.
Very.
Wow, you answered that really quick.
Definitively yes. Anyone
Anyone care to
no?
elaborate on why you enjoyed
With
it?
reservations?
Oh, we'll get there.
Yeah, I haven't finished the book yet, but I saw the movie. And I have to say I liked some of the way the movie was rather than the book, but
I just kind of thought how I would feel if I was Mac, and I felt like a lot of the things I related to him. You know, if I was him,
Yeah.
that's the way I would feel too about things. And I mean, if I was in that situation, but the only thing I wouldn't probably do is I wouldn't be thinking that I would be blaming God for Missy, But other than that, I don't know. I just feel I definitely would be kind of like him.
You don't think you would? Like a little?
No, I don't think so.
You're never angry with God?
Nope.
Not to probe, but
No.
I have times where, I can sympathize with the anger with God side. Just why does all this stuff happen to me or something? And his are obviously very serious things, and go into more detail on any of them. But it's yeah.
Did anybody read the book and go to the movie both?
I'm in Bill's boat.
I would like to see
Read the book
Almost.
a long time ago.
I read the book,
I
what
would
would we
like
be,
to
like
see
9 years ago?
Reading
Yeah,
the book,
yeah.
I did
seeing
go
the
to the
movie.
movie, and
Yeah,
I
we did.
can't recollect the book to see how closely exactly.
Yeah,
followed
yeah,
the book.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I wanted to go, the movie didn't make it, but I reread the book because it was so many years ago. And even later on, like you said, I'd reread paragraphs right before, because like, okay, well, what did he say? You know, just like,
There's a
You
lot
wanna
to
get-
digest.
Yes.
Yeah.
you wanna get what they're saying and stuff, and especially, sometimes the things that the Holy Spirit, I can't remember her name, but you know.
Sarah, you?
Yeah.
Serayu?
There's more detail in the book that I felt kind of bogged down compared to the movie, but there's more Old Testament-ish, I thought.
What I was thinking when I was reading this book is because it was always talking about relationships, and I was saying, wait a second. Did Pastor Zach write this book? Did he just change his name?
His pen name, nom de plume.
Well, when I read that, I said, well, that's why Pastor Zach chose this book.
They're on to me. Okay, so my next question for you all was there, and we've kind of dived into this a little bit, but is there one particular part in this book, and it doesn't have to be just one, but if you can just limit it to one for now, is there one particular part in this book that you found quite challenging?
Yeah, when, what was her name, Sophia?
The judge?
The
So,
judge.
The judge, yeah.
When she asked him to judge, and
Right.
that was profound, I thought. I said, oh, wow, it's really very, very interesting part of the book to me.
Anybody else? Any particular part of this book that you found particularly challenging?
I thought it kind of beat you over the head with the forgiveness stuff a lot. Like,
Don't you think
it just
that's
goes
something we
over
should
and
do?
over about like, yeah,
That's
we
kind of the
get
whole
it.
point of it.
It's hard to forgive. It's hard to forgive people. Like we get it. Especially
That part
when,
of it, you've only seen the movie, you don't know the book.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Because I don't know in the book if it's that much.
There's a lot there. They keep, in each chapter, it just adds more and more to digest with this understanding of what freedom is, what relationship is, who God is, how we relate to God, how we should relate to each other and don't relate to each other. And it keeps adding more and more on as you go through the book. Now, I have not seen the movie, so I can't really resonate with what was portrayed in the movie as versus what's portrayed in the book. So those of you who have seen the movie and read the book, you'll have to help fill in some of those gaps.
I think the gist of it, I mean, I've only got about a little over halfway through the book, but there's some things that are a little different on how Mac gets up to the shack and what happens when he gets there. Some things are changed, but the overall gist of it is the same.
Okay.
Well, and I know you didn't want to talk about the first part that much, but I think, just something that might challenge people is just in the, in the initial part of the book when he gets the note, and, how fast would people think, oh, this note's from God, God wants me to go to the shack, I mean, you wonder, I thought he came to that conclusion, or that he thought that that's maybe who the note was from, because, I guess he did sort of wonder it could have been from somebody playing a trick on him or whatever, but the whole Papa thing.
But nobody else knew that they
Yeah.
called him Papa, and there were
Yeah.
no tracks in the snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I just think that part would be something that I think would kind of test your faith, do you think
Well,
God's gonna
Yeah.
deliver you a note,
Well, there's a good question to ask there. If you received a note from Papa or whatever name you use for God, and said, I miss you, come see me at such and such place, would you go?
No, depends where the place was.
See, because we're so
At the
judgmental.
corner, maybe yes, but around the world, no.
Probably not, but it'd have to be, to get you to even think of it, it'd have to be something that only you would know that other people didn't. I don't know how much you want to talk about the movie or not for people who haven't seen it, but in the movie, I didn't get the sense that he jumped to the conclusion that this was God. It's just that
No, I don't think
No.
so.
he
Yeah,
had to go.
yeah.
Maybe it was God, maybe it was the kidnapper, but it just,
He didn't know.
he had to know, he couldn't ignore it.
Right, and well, actually, that's the same feeling you get from the book, is,
Well, from the book, I got the
Yeah.
feeling more that this might be God, I need to go. Maybe it was the kidnapper, maybe
Right.
something, I've gotta be careful, but he'd come to the decision that God was calling, is the way I read it.
Because the book
But-
can give you that internal dialogue or monologue in
Right.
his head that a
Right.
That's
movie,
true. The book
unless there's a
is-
narrator in the movie,
So
but
but
there
I
isn't.
guess I didn't interpret it that way, Bill. I felt it was more of, his curiosity was piqued enough that he had to go, you're right.
Right.
But whether or not it was actually truly God or not, I don't think he was fully convinced. And even when he got to the shack at first,
Exactly.
there's a part of the book where he's like, I'm such a fool, why did I even come? And he does say, why did I even expect God to show up?
Well, he
You know?
starts walking away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's when, he sees God's
Exactly.
presence, because didn't he kind of get angry and throw some things?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But, and you do worry, I mean, it could have been the kidnapper,
Right.
that tried to lure him back there, and it's
Sure.
like, that would be a little scary.
We fit Jan.
That's the way the movie portrays it.
Can we fit Jan into? I know she
Yeah.
wants to come in.
well, is there,
Is there another
More
chair
space
by
down
Bill?
there.
There's space back here.
Space.
that's folks to, I go over, but I got a table here.
Yeah.
So you were asking about what you found challenging, and part I was reading last night was most challenging to me where Papa is telling, I believe it's God the Father is talking to him, that there is no good or evil, that it's all our view, and it seems to me there are some things that are absolutes. There are some things that are good. There are some things that are evil. There are certain actions that are evil. There are shades of it that we decide is evil because we don't know the whole story or whatever. That causes war, etc. There's political
Where did
differences
Where
that
did
you
you
can.
get that? There is no evil.
Wow.
Well, from whatever chapter I was reading, she was saying that good and evil is just humans' perception, and that's why there are wars and conflicts. And maybe I read more into it than
I
thought,
believe
but-
that's, I know what you're talking about, Bill. I would have to go reread it, but there's a section in the book where, and we'll get there as we go through the chapters. So I'll just touch on it here briefly. There's a section where they're talking about judgment, and mainly human judgment, and talking about the philosophical. It's a philosophical question, really, of what is good, what is evil, and how human judgment and perceptions play into fueling both of those. And that's kind of what the discussion is about. And so that's one thing that we'll definitely touch on, because I found that fascinating and challenging and interesting as well, that whole conversation about good and evil and human judgment.
So I mean, continuing on the judgment, I mean, we're conditioned by our world to be judgmental.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So everything you do, you're judgmental about everything, you know? So
Well, and that's
how
one
do you
of the
get
things.
beyond that?
We'll get there, Pete. That's one of the things that and I'm not guaranteeing an answer to that question, just that we'll talk about it later. That's one of the things that they're trying to point out in the book is the brokenness of the world has made us this way. Right? And is there a way out of that, which is kind of one of the main themes that the book is talking about, how to escape the brokenness of the world, if there is such an escape. So we'll get there. I'm going to move on to my next question. Again, as you read through or reread through the book, as questions come to you or things that are challenging to you, speak out to you, write them down and bring them with you so that we can discuss them, because I'll try and hit on what I find important in this book, but it may not be everything that's important to you. And I want to make sure that we have a chance to discuss things that you found challenging and intriguing. But my next question was, is there, so we've talked about the challenges, but is there any part of the book that you found quite invigorating?
Well, the book's description of the Trinity, I really liked. I had never really thought of it the way they did, and they talked about it, and it's a mystery, but three persons in one, you talk about it, but you don't really sit and contemplate, at least I haven't, and the way there were three people, but they all were the same people. You know, there weren't just three manifestations of one type, you know, like, I'm rambling now.
Yeah, the description of the Trinity, I found that very fascinating and interesting. And we'll start getting into that a little bit today. Other parts that you found invigorating in the book?
I thought about the waterfall, and that's where he was behind the waterfall, and he could see his children beyond the waterfall, and they could see him, but they couldn't touch. I thought that was kind of an interesting concept.
Well, I thought they couldn't see him.
No,
Well,
they couldn't.
No, he said that he couldn't. They couldn't.
but they could sense he was
They
there.
could sense he was
Yeah,
there. That's
okay.
right.
Yeah.
I think Missy knew he was there.
She could sense it, but she couldn't
She couldn't see him.
see him.
But it was
Yeah.
gonna be a memory for the other ones.
Well, it
A
was
vague memory somewhere.
a dream, I believe.
Maybe a dream,
That's
yeah,
what-
a
that's
dream.
what
Or
she
might
said.
come to them as a dream.
The other kids were dreaming at that point, and so.
So I haven't read that part, I just have the visualization from the movies.
Yeah.
The walking on water part was, I kind
That was
of
fun.
chuckle about
Yeah,
that.
it was fun.
Because I expected Mac to just go into the,
Like-
drop down in the
like
water like
Like Peter did.
Peter did,
Yeah, because he
And
didn't
then
have
all of a
faith.
sudden you have faith, and then all of a sudden you come back up, but he didn't, he just stepped
Yeah,
right
he
out of
didn't
the water.
require
and got his-
faith, he just did what he was, well,
Right.
maybe he had to have faith to actually step off.
Yeah.
I mean, I would sit there and say, yeah, right. You first.
Anything else?
And he had the benefit of hearing that, Jesus walked on water.
Right.
And that, somebody else could win.
Okay, so, like I said, most of what we'll be talking about are the theological concepts that are presented in the book, beginning with chapter 6 and onward. However, I did want to give enough time, and we've talked about this a little bit already, but if there's anything anybody wants to talk about with the story of Mac's tragedy, how he, the great sadness, and how it led him to the shack. If there's anything anybody wants to talk about with that, the first part of the book, this would now be the time where we can discuss that. So I didn't want to just slough it off and say, oh, that's that's not important, because that's very important. Because the whole reason Mac's going through this is what he experienced there, and I think all of us could just resonate with his feelings in some form or fashion, because I remember reading through that book and just being so devastated for him and his family's loss. And just the fact that, you play back the scenario in your head and you realize there's really nothing he could have done. Because he had to respond so instantaneously to his other two children falling under the canoe and not coming above the water. I mean, as any of us as a parent, that would instant reaction. That would be to just run off and save those kids. And there's just nothing he could have done about that. And they talk about that in the book too. I just wanted to give some space if there's anything for those first 5 chapters anybody wants to talk about or discuss.
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about the fact that I don't think they ever addressed the repercussions for the son who was called away by his own that called Mac away from Missy, and what he must have felt like, what if, all the what ifs that young child had, and I'm surprised that that really never, they talked about Kate and her loss, but they never talked about the boy that almost drowned and that Mac went and saved. I mean, he had to know that if Mac was there, if he hadn't have almost drowned, Mac would have been next to Missy, and that's never addressed.
And it is
If they
odd,
both
never
pop
talk about
up.
Josh, it's only Kate.
No, they don't talk about that. They talk about Kate and how she.
Kate felt more responsible.
Yeah.
And in the movie,
Right.
Kate is really goofing off rather than just waving the paddle. In the movie, she's standing up in the canoe
Right.
and the son is
Tips
trying to
over.
get her to sit down and when this all happens. So in the movie, they make it much more dramatic that the girl would have felt more at fault.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
the book,
I
it
didn't
was.
get
That's
that.
why it tipped over.
Yeah, the
Did
book,
you
it
guys
was.
get that?
No, you're right. Yeah,
In
the book doesn't.
The
But
book, it was much more accidental. You know, she just waved and that caused them to go. In the
Yeah,
book,
I-
in the movie, she's goofing off more, so they made it more dramatic towards Kate. But I could agree that I'm surprised that Josh wasn't bothered.
Has anybody been in a canoe?
yeah,
Right.
I've been
They are
under.
very, you know.
I've been under a canoe too, and that was what like struck me is like, why doesn't he just get back? Like, we used to play this game called Submarine or something. You just get under the canoe, and I was like, why doesn't he just get out from under the canoe?
Panicked.
I know he got hit or in the head or something, or the strap of his thing was stuck too. Yeah, so he couldn't. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't on purpose that he was under it, so it's a lot different than when you purposefully flip a canoe over and go under on purpose. But
The only other thing I wanted to mention was I was impressed that the marriage didn't suffer, that Nan was instantly supportive and repeatedly tells Mac that she doesn't blame him. I know several marriages that have failed as a result of losing a child. One of my dad's uncles, their child fell out of a car while it was moving, and marriage failed as a result. Don't know anything more than that, but
And she encouraged him to go to the shack even,
No.
didn't she?
No.
No, she didn't
She
encourage
doesn't
him.
know.
no, she didn't
Well, no, but
know.
she-
He just
when he
runs
left,
off.
She said it was okay.
No, she didn't know he was
she
going.
She didn't know anything
on
about
the
it.
original trip, she said to go.
Yeah.
Oh, the original
The
one.
camping trip.
Yeah, the original.
Oh, yeah, when they're.
Yeah,
Oh, the campsite, yeah.
yeah,
She
but she,
definitely.
when he took the kids
Yeah.
camping alone, yeah.
Right.
But
But, you know, yeah, so that might be
Yeah, once
what
they
makes us
know.
different with both the movie. But, yeah, the book, I thought it was funny, you know, when they brought up at the, you know, later, that Kate felt so guilty, because in the book, she just kind of raised a, or, you know, nothing much. And you would have thought the boy that was being saved
And see, I would have had guilt feelings as a mother that I put my need for a weekend in classes as more important than family time, and because of that.
That's something to look back though.
yeah,
You know, so I would have had all, you know.
I don't know. Even if there's two parents there, if you see both your kids,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. We
for
both
whatever
run
reason, if
out.
they
Yeah,
both go
yeah,
under,
we
are
both would
you're
run
both
out.
gonna run. At least
You're right.
I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but
But I'm.
I would
You're
assume
right.
probably
You're
both.
right. Yeah, we
I
both
would've
go.
thought somewhere.
Who's gonna stay behind with
Think there's
Missy?
nothing
I
wrong
mean,
there.
she's just staying.
She's
She's
Stable
coloring,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just fine.
Well, Nan had a good relationship with Papa,
But-
so,
Yeah.
she took care of
that
her,
kept her.
that stuff probably better than
That was-
Mac was able to do.
That was the sense I got in the book,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
Nan already had a very strong faith, and so she was able to deal with the tragedy through her own faith life. Where Mac had kind of forgotten God and put God on the back burner, and so he had a much more difficult time. But yeah, it's interesting that they don't talk about Josh and his, and Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but there's part of me that wonders if that is part of that. Well, I don't know because
Josh is the middle one, right, of the three?
No, he
Or
was
no,
the
he's the
oldest.
oldest. She's and Kate's okay.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think they just had only certain things they wanted to focus on in the book.
You're right,
They-
yeah.
Not necessarily realistic, where they
It makes you wonder though if this is really Mac's retelling of what happened. If he didn't even think twice about addressing how Josh might be suffering, I don't.
Well, he does say that Josh seems to adjust because of the relationship with the new girlfriend, which kind of gets back to that old thing that we rely on love and faith and
That's
all
right.
of
Yeah,
that
except
to
she
get
was-
to where we end up.
Yeah, she was
Right,
really
so-
good for him, I think,
so
I think
Josh-
that helped him through.
Yeah, Josh seemed to have
I
had
mean, it's
support
mentioned,
network.
yeah.
And I think because of the story in the book, like, we might have seen right away Josh would have felt guilty because he's the one that he was drowning. That would have made sense, because in the book, they don't make Kate splashing all around and goofing off so much. You don't really know until, he's with God, or isn't that who finally tells him that, Kate felt responsible for it, and it came as a surprise to them. Neither Nan or Mac knew that Kate would have ever, that she had been feeling like that. They knew she wasn't herself and she was struggling, but they didn't know that's why, and that made a better story than, like, Josh would have probably been obvious, so.
Interesting. Anything else you folks want to talk about the first 5 chapters?
Well, just even in the beginning, Mac's background,
Seminary
running
student.
away,
Mhm.
seminary student, but he ran away from home, and his relationship with his dad. I mean, that's kind of a whole basis for his faith later on too, and the end of the book.
I hadn't started reading the book yet. Even when I went to the movie, I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to have time to read this. I
Yeah.
just need to at least know what's going on. So I went to the movie. Mom said I cheated, but I came back to their place on some other time, and I was like, well, I don't know if I had abusive of enough relationship with my father to There were people that were bawling their eyes out through the parts with him and his dad in the theater, and I was like, I mean, I get why, but to me it was the guy's dad is this drunk who's just
Abuse.
yeah, why do I? Yeah, later then when there's the forgiveness between the two of them and all of that kind of stuff, but it's I just watched that part and I was like, what is this?
Your son was deprived.
I know, I needed a stronger.
There's still time.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't like where this conversation's going. So.
Don't abuse your kids just to follow the Shaq storyline, but
Look how well it turns out.
yeah, exactly. He really comes to terms with it,
But
but
I think it's amazing that Mac ends up being such a loving and wonderful father
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
what his
Right.
father was,
Yeah.
and apparently what his grandfather was the same, right?
well, I've heard about
Yeah.
that from people too. Is that a lot of people in those types of upbringings might later in life, commit themselves I don't want to be anything like my parents raised me, and I'm going to go 180 degrees the opposite direction. But
From a psychological standpoint, most commonly there's 2 reactions to that kind of abuse. To become an abuser yourself,
Mhm.
or to be resilient and to escape that life so that you don't live that way.
But the scars are always there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
There's a lot
probably
of
sometimes
self-discipline
hits
to
the
do it.
faces
Right.
because you get to the point where the scars hurt more than the original injury.
yeah,
Yeah, but I wonder, because of his relationship with God, and Nan calling Papa, and all that, but that God, when he gets the shack, takes on the form of a woman. Even though he'd call her Papa, but I wonder if that was, he saw a female because of his relationship with his dad.
Right.
Well, that's what she
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
She
The
says,
man-
she says
She
that,
says
and that's
that.
a good lead
You're
into
not
the next
ready.
question I was
Right.
going to
Yeah.
ask, which
Oh,
is taking
nicely.
more you know, what did you think about the way God as Trinity was portrayed in this book? Father as a compassionate black woman, Jesus as a Middle Eastern man wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and the Holy Spirit as Sarah Yu, an Asian woman who has an ethereal vibe to her. What do y'all think of the way the book portrayed the persons of the Trinity?
I've never thought of the father as Aunt Jemima, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though?
But somehow, like,
Makes sense.
I mean, there's plenty of things with like Morgan Freeman as God, and that's just you switch the gender, but it's an elderly African American person. I'm not sure what it is about African Americans or black people, I guess, just in general, that kind of denotes that kind of wisdom or something of a God the Father type thing. I mean, if books and movies have both kind of used that representation of them.
Well, I think they use it to challenge your perceptions.
Yeah, he's no longer just like the old long white beard, flowing white robe.
Gandalf.
Yeah, Gandalf.
Gandalf, yeah.
It's the generations now. I mean, people are thinking differently. So you see
Well,
that.
just thinking, there's no gender,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
The only one with any gender is Jesus, because he was a human man. But
Yeah.
and there's been a lot of work culminating in the ELW where they made things more like God instead of Him. Try to use more sexless language for God and the Holy Spirit.
Well, and Eloisa, who's the name of the black woman, is the name God chooses, which I thought was hilarious. El in Hebrew means God.
Oh,
She explains to Mac, I remember in chapter 6, she says, if I choose to appear to you as father or mother, it's because I love you. And she does explain that Mac did not have the best relationship with his father, and so that she was naming that it's a struggle for him to call God Papa, and so, if she had appeared as an old white guy, would that have been helpful to him? No, he probably would have been much more dismissive, but to appear as a woman, very compassionate, we read in the book that really resonated with Mac. He felt like he could trust her and have conversation with her. He felt like she cared. So that was the image of God that Mac needed at that moment. But why do you think the author chose to portray God in this way? Does it bring you some freedom in how you imagine God? Or is this quite challenging for you?
I don't know if I'd say challenging.
I think it's just interesting that
I think
Just
it's challenging.
takes you-
It's always been our Father who art in heaven.
Yeah.
The mother of the universe, maybe.
Yeah, you have a lot of
I
like
don't know.
nurturing God at the start of prayers or things like that feel more gender, more towards the female perspective. I mean, say what you will about what that says about what I think about nurturing the word as male or female, but like often when we think of God the Father throughout the Old Testament, I think of him as like a strong, like almost like Mac's dad, kind of, that like he's very pious, but he's, he will smite you if you've done wrong, kind of thing. Like God the Father is like, he will, and it's interesting to use that. When Diane, when you said that it's different generations, I just wanted to double check, like, how old is William Paul Young? He's 61, so it's not like he's some young whippersnapper that's...
61 now?
Yeah.
Well,
So
when
he
he
was
much
51.
So
So 52 or 58?
yeah, 10 years ago-ish. So.
Those darn
The
51
generation below
But
me
so
anyway.
still, yeah. But at least then, you know, so he's not. I don't know. He's not my age or something. Who's like totally open-minded about
Yeah.
God the Father or whatever. Like, because to me, it's not that challenging. I went when I was at Luther. We had all kinds of different people talking about what do you envision God looks like and different things like that. And it's it's a whole
Well, I
different
remember-
topic, but.
I remember coming up and I was Catholic, raised Catholic, and and I'm about his age too, so I would have brought up thinking that God was a man, and he was a man figure, and all that. And it's interesting that he changed his viewpoint of that whole thing and just twisted all around. So just that viewpoint, being his age, my age are about the same, so, interesting.
I think most of us were probably brought up with that. Even today's kids, where the other things are out there about looking at the other aspects of God that are shown in the Old Testament, those aren't usually taught. And female theologians, when they first came into some positions of being recognized, which was during my lifetime, later lifetime, because in the early years, many of them were not allowed to be ordained, and certainly not to get to study to the point where they had a doctor's degree or more in theology and had studied widely. And I'd like to point out that one reason the female attributes of God were not mentioned so much were because most of the preachers were men. And we lived in a patriarchal society where men, there were no women presidents or governors, or very few anyway.
Or members of the Lutheran Conference.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So all the ones making decisions were the men, especially back when the scriptures were chosen for what's going to be read every Sunday. The lectionary. They were all men. So I think that's something we have to keep in mind. And I do remember once early on in the 50s or 60s, somebody saying in a music conference, be careful how you teach children. If you really concentrate only on God the Father, and that child is being raised like Mac was in a home where the father is bullying them, then their concept of God is forever screwed. And so we have to be careful the terms we use when dealing with children. I found that very hard.
Here is something that this is God speaking to Mac in the book. If I choose to appear to you as a man or a woman, it's because I love you. For me to appear to you as a woman and suggest that you call me Papa is simply to mix metaphors, to help you keep from falling so easily back into your religious conditioning. She leaned forward as if to share a secret. To reveal myself to you as a very large white grandfather figure with a flowing beard like Gandalf would simply reinforce your religious stereotypes. And this weekend is not about reinforcing your religious stereotypes. What do you think about that?
I always have a God image that I can say is kind of both. Because I look at it and say, when God comes down with his scourges and, the plague of locusts and that kind of stuff, I view that as being very male for some reason. But then I look at his compassionate side and say, experientially, in my life, most of that has come from women. Look at it and say, wives, mothers, nurses, technicians, etc. They tend to be, wives and mothers, obviously women, but
But that's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Because men aren't allowed to be that way a lot of times.
Exactly. And like I said, when I've encountered, in one case, a very compassionate doctor, it's kind of a little like, that's incredible. So.
Well, it just stretches your imagination, expands your ability to imagine and realize how little you really know and how little you really can judge or can
And stereotypes.
conceive of something like that. It's just beyond.
Is it weird that I mean, the biggest one that we're focusing on is probably the most obvious, to focus on the perception of God as God the Father with the woman in that role. But I don't know, the Holy Spirit role was still also a woman, and I still also was like, I don't know, there's probably people that think like all three of these should be men or something. But to me, it was, like, well, her role is very mystic kind of thing, and which fits what I would feel like the Holy Spirit would be like. But
Well, it's interesting what God said to him later, because God, Papa could tell that, he really loved Jesus and he really clicked with Jesus, and all that. And when Papa pointed out, everybody loves Jesus, like he's this good guy.
he's the relatable one, yeah.
He's so likable, because like you said,
He's dropping everything today.
they never really blame Jesus for all these bad things that happen, all the evil in the world. That's God that did it. God sent this,
So Jesus is God.
Right. Yeah. But that's what Papa was saying, is when people want to do the blame game, it's,
Yeah, we usually think of the big guy upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when Jesus came to earth, as if he's just this likable, friendly.
He's walking on water. He's sawing stuff. He's doing
Lots of fish and
Yeah.
bread.
Yeah, he brought back somebody.
Scourging the sellers in the temple.
Yeah.
My own personal opinion is that I'd love for God to appear to me as a squirrel.
All right.
Then I have to worry about all those that get electrocuted on the line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, why?
And the one that runs out in front of your car, we saw two of that this morning that almost hit their end.
Is that in like because a squirrel is busy enough that they seem like they can run around and answer all those prayers?
No, I just love squirrels.
I'm just coming up with random ideas here to justify.
You can have some of mine.
Yeah.
Wait till they're in your attic.
Yeah, not so great.
They bite Christmas bulbs off to spit them on the ground. Christmas tree lights outside, picked up on the,
Yeah, those are-
bite the bulbs off.
Those aren't nuts.
Okay, so we're going to start getting into some good meaty things here. Now, in the chapter 6, they begin a discussion about freedom, because Mac was wondering if the fact that God knew that he would show up, if that meant that he had to come, or if that was, starting to get into that question of free will. They're talking about it, and she mentioned that of course he was free to come, or he's free to go. She's not interested in keeping prisoners. But then I'm going to pick up here and I'll read a paragraph, starting at the bottom of page 94, if you want to follow along in your books. It's the final paragraph on page 94, which goes into page 95. She paused only briefly and then turned back to her task, talking to him over her shoulder. Or if you want to go just a wee bit deeper, you could talk about the nature of freedom itself. Does freedom mean that you are allowed to do whatever you want to do? Or could we talk about all the limiting influences in your life that actively work against your freedom? Your family genetic heritage, your specific DNA, your metabolic uniqueness, the quantum stuff that is going on at a subatomic level where only I am always present, the always present observer. Or the intrusion of your soul's sickness that inhibits and binds you, or the social influences around you, or the habits that you have created, synaptic bonds and pathways in your brain. And then there are advertising, propaganda, and paradigms. Inside that confluence of multifaceted inhibitors, she sighed, what is freedom really? So,
Just so you know, some of us with older books, that's 96 and 97.
Oh, I was gonna say, 'cause
Okay.
I don't see
I
it.
saw a couple
Yeah,
other
it was-
people going, I was like, I
There
can't
it is.
find his words and where is it? So
I found it.
I thought
There we
mine
go.
was the first edition, though, I thought.
maybe it's newer ones. What some different edition
Maybe they put an extra
where he
page
added
in
2
there.
extra pages in there
Yeah.
somewhere.
Give me a second to find it.
Yeah, because now and it's just like his.
This is a newer one, that's probably an older one.
Probably
What was the question?
Okay, so after hearing that, the question is, what is freedom? What is freedom, and our human limitations keep us from being totally free?
Our cultural background certainly
Mhm.
does. Yeah. And just sometimes our own attitude. Yeah.
Well, it's
She's
like
talking about
you-
genetics and DNA and, stuff you're just born with.
Yeah.
That's,
But you're also born with your environment. And, yeah, it changes over time, but
you're also born with what you think the concept of who you should be or who you want to be, and who
I
you
don't
develop
know.
in your mind what you want to be
I don't know.
as
if
examples
that's-
of your environment.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think that's kind of environmental learning.
And it goes back to like the dementia discussion from a month ago or so of like, how do you know that you are you kind of question.
She does mention
So are
brain
we
synapses.
free to, those,
yeah.
Are we more than just our brain?
But the next couple of paragraphs that kind of answer that question and say you're really not supposed to know yet.
back to the Kierkegaard from that Trip Fuller book. The more you think you know, you don't know.
Well, there is that sense of divine mystery here, and she gets into it as later in the chapter as she starts diving into the explanation of the Trinity. She says, part of this is a mystery, and you're not supposed to fully grasp it. She even says, who would want to worship a God you fully understood?
Yeah, it's pretty boring going day in and day out.
I asked this question though because it's an interesting one as she starts diving into the conversation, and we see in later chapters they talk more about the true essence of what humans were created to be as opposed to who we think we actually are right now. And this kind of starts that conversation of have our limitations really kept us from being who we truly are? Kind of a follow-up question to this is, there's a quote that I found in the book that I found very interesting. And this is the part where she's talking about the bird. And the bird's true nature is to fly. And if a bird stays grounded, then it's not living out its true nature. And she talks about if you clip a bird's wings, you put a limitation on the bird's true nature. And then she says to Mac, you, on the other hand, you were created to be loved. Just think about that sentence right there. You were created to be loved. So for you to live as if you were unloved is a limitation.
So freedom in this respect is all in what your mind is, right? About. Because you have limitations of your body. In your world and everything else. But freedom, in this respect, they're talking about freedom in just what's in your mind, correct? Am I wrong in saying that? Because not everybody's going to have the same freedom because they got limitations of everything. Body, your environment, and everything else.
I kind of wonder if the freedom that God is getting at here is to be truly open to being loved. To be truly open to being loved by God and loved by others and to love others in return. We'll get to this in the later chapters, but there's a part where Mac, and I can't remember which of the Trinity Mac is talking to at this time, but they're talking about, if people truly loved and trusted each other, then there wouldn't be this fear of violence and war and conquering, things of that nature. So I kind of wonder if that's what she's getting at, is that we have limited ourselves to be fully open to love.
She kind of says that, in that same, right after where you stop, it says, only I can set you free, Mackenzie, but freedom can never be forced. And later on, she talks about freedom being in full relationship with God. And
Which gets fully into that whole freedom of the will conversation. You know, Martin Luther's treatise, Freedom of a Christian. We are free from all, servant to none. We are bound to all, servant to all, or something. Does anyone have the exact quote I'm pulling from there? So to understand that we, in Christ, we are totally free from the law and free from the expectations of others. But at the same time, we are also free to be servants of all, to love others and serve others. And this is that Lutheran both and dynamic, you know. You can't have it just one way, black or white. It's got to be both and.
Well, even when you said, you know, the whole part, or, you know, mentioned that part was your purpose is to be loved, in the same way that a bird's purpose is to fly, and it's difficult to get your mind around that part of just being loved, and to me it reminded me a lot of like the Maundy Thursday foot washing thing. You know, I think every sermon, at least one time on a Maundy Thursday, will talk about the disciples didn't want to have their feet washed, and all of us too. It's more awkward to be loved and receive that than to serve or to wash others' feet or to give love, I think. But what does that say about a purpose or anything, or like a free will? I don't know.
Well, think of it this way.
No, if Dave had the answer, then let him go. No.
No. But, no, I've thought of it as are you here with a purpose, or are you here to exist in a relationship?
Yeah.
You know, we studied the purpose-driven life and this, and I've always been looking for purpose and what is God's calling in my life. You know, but maybe His calling is just to live with you, and that's kind of what I thought I'd be saying in here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's been paying attention to my sermons. Yeah, what was I going to say now?
That happens all the time.
I think I had put out the question of what does that all say about a purpose?
Well, and we can look at it, thank you, Steve. We can look at it for a power dynamic too. Because to serve is to still have some power, right? Because we convince ourselves, well, I'm choosing to do this, so it's in my hands to do. But to be served, that puts us in a huge state of vulnerability, because when we're being served, we don't have control over that, you know? And so the power is taken away from us, and for a lot of us, that can be really uncomfortable. I think that's why it's really hard for us to accept a true gift of grace. You know, when somebody, out of the kindness of their heart, bakes us a casserole, maybe we've been sick or we've had a loss, and there's that sense of obligation of, oh, I have to repay this somehow. I need to repay this somehow. You know, instead of just that sense of, wow, what a true gift that I can just enjoy without any strings attached. You know, which is why grace is such a hard concept for us. Because, you know, we've been conditioned. So one of our limitations is to repay kindness with kindness, right?
So dump out it's better to give than receive idea.
Yeah, right. And that's not to discourage generosity, because there's much joy in generosity.
Right.
But for it to be a true relationship where everyone is on an equal around, there has to be both a willingness to serve and a willingness to be served.
Are we receiving something when we are giving of ourselves generously?
You tell us.
Yeah,
I think so.
I knew you were going to point at me there. Because I've always said, everybody always asks me about like donating a kidney. It's like, it was an easy decision. The whole process was easy. Everything was easy. For him, accepting it, he stopped me like time and time again along the path of like, do you want to do this? Do you, like, and it's hard to receive that kind of love
And I guess you have
from
to
what
ask
it is.
yourself, why was it easy for you?
Love.
Yeah, I guess I receive the love that I get from him,
No, I
got
guess
from
I
him,
wasn't looking for an answer.
or
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah. I mean,
saying that whole thing of being altruistic doesn't exist, supposedly, because how can you give without a feeling of joy? I mean,
Yeah.
there is no such thing as altruism because
And there are people that are much less connected than me to my father that give organs and things like that. Then it just.
And I guess the other half of that question was, I'm not looking for an answer, is why was it hard? And why is, I had a very wise guy tell me once that the best thing you can ever do for anybody is to accept, say thank you, and let it go. Because the easiest thing in the world is to give, for most people. I mean, human nature, the hardest thing is to accept. And that's that freedom, that when you free yourself up to truly accept what it is that's given to you, that's hard.
My best friend will give to everybody, but to do something for her is just,
That is so
she
Tough
just
to do.
can't do it.
And it's almost hard to be
She
a
thinks
friend
she's
of that
putting you
person
out.
because you never are truly equal.
Or like when Pastor Zach said, a lot of people, if somebody brings you a casserole or something and you want to repay them and make them something back, some other food, like, I guess in my dad's circumstance, that might be one reason why it's hard is because you can't give that back. Like, you are limited now to.
But that is a true example of grace.
Yeah.
Craig can't return a kidney to you, Stephen.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
Give you a kidney bean.
Yeah.
He doesn't like kidney beans.
Yeah, I was just considering you're talking about the equality, everybody's on an equal basis and all. I think that's what they're trying to say in the Acts reading this morning, in the early church. And it talked about, and it's in their mind in a sense, but it never really happened, I don't think, this way. That they would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds so on, as they had need, day by day, as they spend much time together in the community of equality.
Well, and Justo Gonzalez, a church historian who wrote a book, the story that Luke tells, we studied that book last year. He would argue that part in the Acts reading, which is written by the same author who wrote the Gospel of Luke, that is that author's understanding of the new kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the new kingdom looks like. Everyone is equal together, changes the dynamic significantly. Now, and Martin Luther would argue that is, that's God's grace. The acceptance of God's grace is to accept to be loved by God. And then the response that comes from that love is to love others. And so the love spreads. But we were created to be loved, which is, I think, a very interesting, because that takes away that power dynamic. And you think about it, if we acted as a society in a way where we received love more than we gave love, that would really transform things. Because one of the issues that creates this limitation is the power dynamics. Who am I going to choose to love? Who am I going to choose to give to? Who am I going to choose yada, 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 you know. And we do that because one of our human limitations is that power dynamic. You know, who am I going to choose to associate with? And then, you know, add on to that judgments and stereotypes and other things that drive us into that more judgment and choosing whom we love, but to act with a total reception of just receiving whatever love comes our way, that's challenging, I think. That's the challenge of relationship. We are good at the giving part in relationship, but I think we really struggle with the receiving. It's kind of like when I talk about prayer. We're really good at telling God what we want and how things are going for us, but we're not so good at just sitting back and letting God speak to us, receiving God's voice and the abundant life that comes through that. You know, so this is a very interesting question of, you know, true freedoms and receiving all that wonderful stuff that we'll continue to talk about, but not today because we are out of time.
Well,
Can I follow up on that, reading from Acts with a commercial? The book of Acts is the topic for the study at the Thursday morning forum from 9:30 till 11:30 every Thursday during the month of May. It's very interesting. It's being taught by a Jewish scholar.
Oh, wow.
They're professor of religion at Co. And they start about, well, actually people are gathering before 9 because they have refreshments out.
Fruit
Yeah,
and
parking
cookies
space.
and rolls and stuff like that.
And it costs $36, $12 a session individually, or four for $35, but that's passed out to $12 a session. And they're very interesting forums usually.
And this woman is someone who a friend of mine described as she could read the phone book and make you curious and interested.
That's Thomas, 319-477. Well, thank you, folks. We will continue the discussion in 2 weeks from today. Again, next week, remember, I will be out of town. Unless somebody else here wants to lead the discussion and you all meet without me.
do you have questions queued up or something? Or?
I was gonna be gone next week anyway.
Questions and stuff.
Okay, time to go.